guess I'm accidentally Team Molly. Hi everyone. So I haven't done any videos about Insecure because honestly there are already so many great black female content creators who are talking about Insecure, and black male creators that are talking about black folk who are talking about Insecure and having really great engaging conversations with it, that I didn't really want to do one because I felt like I wasn't really adding anything to the environment. I would like pop on a chat and then embarrass myself and then come back, and that was fine. But after this most recent episode, I realized that, at least from what I was looking at, that I seem to be in the minority when it comes to the opinions of the character of Molly, played by Yvonne Orji. I'm not Team Molly, but I do think that Molly is the victim of something that's very common in a lot of shows, of being the female character that gets a lot of grief from the audience because they are often set up in conflict with the main character. So we will get into this because I think people are too harsh on Molly. I think the biggest issue with Insecure as a show, and why so much of it leads to this kind of confusion, is because it isn't very good at continuing the storylines, emotional growth, and dynamics of characters from one season to another. It often feels as if the show sets up really big moments, but then never really continues it. And so you as the audience are always filling in the gaps of what you think is going on. And this is something that's been a problem with the show for a while, but has become so more recently as we see Issa and Molly both going through their own personal journeys and getting a very limited perspective about where they all are. And especially considering this is so much about personal growth and emotional evolution, it definitely feels like they're doing a disservice to both women by not actually spending time to develop why they feel the way they do. And I think because audiences are already inclined to prefer Issa because she's the funny one, she's the lead, Issa Rae is the face of the show, we are intended and we're used to having the protagonist be the perspective through which we most agree with. And Molly, while she has been a sort of a co-lead, especially in the last 2 seasons, she has been more of a supporting player, and we know less about her in comparison to Issa. I will say honestly, we know very little about most of the characters in general, but that is pretty much par for the course for most half an hour long shows of this nature. We didn't know that much about the women of Sex and the City for a really long time unless something dramatic happened. So that's not even that big of a deal. Biggest difference between Sex and the City or Girlfriends or Living Single in this is that there really isn't as much of a inclination from both the writers and the audience to really view each character as a protagonist. Even though Carrie Bradshaw was the star of Sex and the City, people were invested in all of the women, some more than others, but all of them would get episodes to themselves. They would have dramatic things going on. Almost every episode there'd be a little slither for them, and then Carrie's overarching arc would be above them. Similar things with Living Single. Like, even though Queen Latifah is sort of like one of the faces you would see all of the women and the 2 gentlemen on the stills. They were all in it together. And that's not what's going on with Insecure. Molly is a vexing character. She's not my favorite for reasons of that she's a very emotionally nuanced, almost sometimes too realistic character. And I think that we have learned that when it comes to realistic female characters, they are always the one that will get dogged out more than anybody else. You look at something from like Breaking Bad, Sons of Anarchy, whenever there's like a wife, more pragmatic, more aggressive female character that's not just happy to be around, there's always this feeling of, why are they such a killjoy? Why are they always doing this? There's always an assumption that they're not carrying emotional labor because it's easier to assume that they're just always trying to destroy what the main character, the protagonist, is doing. So with Molly, what I think is often missing is that she is in a very competitive, very high stress profession. And yes, she be acting ratchet in her day-to-day life, but I feel like that's how she balances that out. She isn't always lawyer Molly 100% of the time. Every time she gets into a fight with somebody, I always see everyone being like, well, Molly's a lawyer, why doesn't she know how to argue? And I always just feel like saying, like, we are not our professions 100% of the time, especially when we're not actually working. Like, my mother is a nurse. She's been a nurse for longer than I've been alive, or as long as I've been alive, actually. And she always says, like, you know, I'm prepared when I go into work. I have a mindset of, like, I'm ready to be here to be on call for anything that can happen. She has that part of her brain slightly toned down when she's at home. So if something were to happen in the house, she would react, but maybe not, her first reaction wouldn't be like to instantly go and help, because she's not in nurse mode. So if Molly's just hanging out with her friends, she's not in here having a whole debrief notes. Because here's the thing, when you go into a case as a lawyer to do an argument, you have spent hours practicing, preparing said argument. You don't come into an interaction with your friend, especially if you don't know you're going to have an argument, just completely prepared with all of your set of points in an emotional state to deliver your opinion. And this expectation that Molly has to be able to deliver that all the time is something that I find that's kind of unfair to her. And I feel like people are always making it seem as though Molly's mess and Issa's mess aren't both messy, and that somehow Molly is projecting this onto Issa and Issa projecting onto Molly. They both project. They're both really bad at truly being there for each other. What I will say is that I think that Molly has absolutely carried on the weight in many times. Like, yes, she ends up being the one to be like, da-da-da, fuck you, which I know feels very aggressive, but she plans Issa's birthday party. She knows what Issa's like. She takes care of Issa as best as she can, and sometimes that reads as overwhelmingly financially and not emotionally, but maybe that's a dynamic that they have. Sometimes there is a friend who is better at doing emotions and one who is not. And I think that we do a disservice to their friendship to make it seem as though it's perpetually uneven. From the Morocco trip to other things, even what happened with Nathan, I understand why people have issues with that moment when she, for those who don't know, when she stops Nathan from coming to Issa's party and then Issa reacts wrongly. It's like Molly was acting like a best friend, taking care of her best friend. Like, Issa has the right to feel like she did something bad because that's Issa's opinion, but I feel like people treat Molly like Emperor Palpatine, like she's just out here with her fingers in every single kind of agenda, and I just feel like that's unfair to the character. I feel like it's an unfair assumption, and I feel people are making that about Molly because she does have all these trappings of sort of like upper middle class bouginess, and I think that that's still something that people find, I don't know, obnoxious, especially with like women. And I know that both her and Issa are both dark skinned, so I don't think it's necessarily a colorism thing, but I do think that if you have two dark skinned women and one of them is the funny one and the other one is the serious one, I think it's just easier to project angry black women onto Molly, even if both women are the same skin tone. But speaking specifically about this episode where Molly goes on her date with Andrew, I just had a few things I wanted to specifically call out. So the first thing is Molly and her assistant. I've seen a lot of people make a comment that Molly went too hard on her assistant and she acted bossed up and too rude or whatever. And the reason why this bothers me is because it completely and utterly ignores the profession that they're in, and it's so, I don't want to call out people, but it's like, it feels so disingenuous to how I see people move in real life when it comes to how they treat retail employees, when I treat people in food service. And I'm not talking about tipping or anything like that. I am talking about the attitudes that people have towards other women of color, especially black women, when they see them in the service industry. For example, I used to work at Barnes & Noble's cafe in Brooklyn, and one day I got called in by my manager because apparently someone complained about me because I didn't seem upbeat. I wasn't smiling or something like that. And I was irritated that she even brought that up to me. Like, and she was black. She was a black woman. I was upset that she even like addressed that with me, because I'm like, girl, I'm usually always upbeat. The one day I'm not is like the time someone's gonna make a complaint about me, but they did. And to just add, you know, context for things, I usually am always upbeat and smiling when I was working that job. I did it even when I was getting cursed out by people, even when people were trying to say that I didn't know what I was doing or trying to cause arguments about refills, when people were talking down to me about how I must be dumb to be working there. Meanwhile, I had a master's degree, but a bitch got to work, so whatever, you know, so all of that. And at this point, I believe I was living in Queens. And so to get to work, especially if I had to open the store, I would get there for 7 o'clock. So I would get up at 5:30 in the morning to shower, not eat, because I would never eat until like 1 o'clock. Even if I woke up at like 5, I would never eat until the afternoon. So wake up, shower, get ready for work, not eat, go, get everything set up, make sure everything is perfect and clean. And one day, just one day while I was making a Frappuccino or making a coffee, I wasn't completely upbeat and I got complained on, right? And I'm making $9.75 an hour, and yet people have an expectation that I have to perform excellence to them. And what I have always noticed is that people are always trying to have people in service work who aren't making that much money, who don't always have great benefits, always want them to be the ones who are exemplary, who are like always like, oh, you should have a smile on your face. I had to teach other people, I'm like, just because someone isn't smiling when they're standing by a cash register doesn't mean they have an attitude. They're just tired because they've been standing there for 8 hours. Have empathy. But there's no empathy for them. But this woman who is probably making between 43K to 70K, depending on how far up in this assistant pool she is, forgets to send her boss an important email about a meeting the night before the night before her boss is supposed to go on a trip. Of course she's getting called out. You can't do that. That is unprofessional. It messes up your boss. When Molly says that you're not getting paid to make me look dumb, that was light, because Molly has to go in there, and if she goes in there looking unprepared, how does that reflect upon her, the black woman in the room? But that's completely taken out because it's like, well, what is the assistant going through? What about her day? And I'm like, I'm not saying that she shouldn't be kind, but as soon as she made her point and the woman apologized, that was it. Or she just had to make that point known. I hope the people who had these things about empathy for this woman making a salary job have that same empathy for service workers. Because I can tell you what that woman did in that office environment was definitely worse than someone who put the wrong kind of milk in your drink that you only have for a preference and not because it's actually for an allergen. And then I felt as if everyone was sort of acting like Molly was being fake for trying to do better when she was on this vacation, like by doing the activities. It's like, if the point that people want is for Molly to grow and try new things and do different things, why is it when she's genuinely trying, the sun's going down, why is it when she's genuinely trying, it's like, oh, she's being fake, oh, she's doing this. It's like, you know, I don't think she's being fake, but she's putting in the effort. I think that it was fine. I think her and Andrew are great. There are so many people who think that like Andrew is like some duplicitous figure. And I'm like, or he's just like an underwritten sweet boyfriend, because he's a character who is written to just be that for Molly. I don't think it's that deep, but everyone's like, oh, they only ever like have sex or do whatever and da-da-da-da. Andrew, who knows the smoothies, like knows what she likes to eat, stands up for her, cares about her, and wants to eat her ass. Listen, y'all can keep the other ones. I'm gonna take Andrew, because that is the kind of dedication that I'm trying to have in my life, okay? Like, it's like the same people who were convinced that, what was his name? The married guy that Molly was dating, Dro. Y'all were convinced that he was lying about being in an open marriage. And I'm like, I know it was underwritten because everything in Insecure is underwritten, but there was nothing to indicate that he was lying other than Molly was uncomfortable with it because she is a monogamous person and didn't know how to express that. And also because y'all assume that he must be lying. It's like, people can be in open relationships. There are black and brown polyamorous. Like, it's not that big of a deal. I always thought the point of that storyline was not anything about Dro. It was about Molly needing to understand that she had certain romantic needs and Dro was never gonna meet them. And I think that was a fine storyline because a lot of people think they can handle open relationships and polyamory and they cannot. Yeah, I just feel like in general people add antagonism to Molly's actions when there is none. And I think that Molly has her bad qualities. Like, she's been on my side eye list since she had her whole biphobic bullshit in the first season. Like, she's always been on my list for that. But I think in general, Molly is someone who is really struggling with the expectations of her work life, with the fact that she maybe has a very limited friend pool because she has been so work-centric. Like, I'm not a Molly or an Issa, but I do understand Molly's drivenness of being like now in her 30s, wanting to have these romantic relationships, but not really having prioritized them, but has in the past prioritized her friendship with Issa, and now she feels like that is slipping away and there's no way for them to talk. Because here's the thing too, Issa would stay calling Molly, talking to Molly when Molly was at work. You can tell that because of the position that she's in, despite it being high powered, she does have some time to like make a call or whatever. So Issa felt very comfortable crouching in on Molly's time, crouching in on Molly's energy when she needed it. But Issa, because she is not prepared and not usually in a situation where she has to perform that kind of labor, fumbles. And Molly, who has a lot of emotional needs, probably just needed Issa to be there for her and was really disappointed that she couldn't be. And it felt like a massive betrayal. That could have been fixed with conversation. It's a plot device that annoys me. It annoys me in this show, and they're both wrong about that. But I feel like people are just acting as though Molly can't be frustrated the same way Issa is. Like, Issa's frustrated that Molly keeps thinking of her as a failure. Molly is frustrated that Issa has spent so much time waffling, but now that she's finally steady, she has no space for her. When Molly has made space for Issa when she was living with all her mess. Because here's the thing about the whole like Andrew, like asking Andrew for a favor thing, and this is what I feel people are missing. Let me put this paper down. The point of the issue is not that Issa found a way to involve Andrew without talking to Molly. We know this. Molly's whole point is, I told you not to talk to my man about this issue because we're not cool, and yet you still found a way to do that. That's the point. Whether you agree with it or not, but people try to act like, well, she found a way around it, so what's the big deal? She did not want her talking to him. Like, we understand Issa's perspective and we have a natural inclination towards it, but Molly's point is also valid right over there. She shouldn't have come for Issa at work though. That was too much. Too much. Cannot abide by that. I do understand what Molly is talking about, even though I don't agree with her perspective. And I think people are turning it into something smaller when her larger point is, we're not talking and we're not cool. I don't want you asking my boyfriend for favors directly or indirectly because we're not even communicating. But let's get into Victor. So in this episode, Victor, who is Andrew's brother, ends up, playing devil's advocate. So Molly goes to get a towel at a hotel after someone splashes water in Andrew's sister-in-law's eye. I think her name is Lydia. And she sees this white couple just get handed the towel with no key card. So when the woman is asking her, this white Mexican woman is asking her for a key card to get a towel, she's just like, listen, I know that you just saw this woman doing this. Like, she does what I think a lot of us always say we're gonna do on Twitter, but don't actually do. But Molly brought that energy. She was like, I saw you do this, you're not gonna do it. And she was about to snatch that towel, but then Victor comes. And then I loved when the woman was gonna give the towel to Victor and she snatched that shit. I felt that moment so good. And then when Victor just comes and just starts bombarding her with microaggressions, just bombarding it with a smile. And the thing about it is, like, I've been hearing people saying that Molly should have acted better, that she should have tried to de-escalate the situation. And I think that Molly was trying to like have it end, and she wanted to just leave it at that. He was like, I'm gonna play devil's advocate. No, sir. You're not gonna play devil's advocate when I just got fucking microaggressioned in this hotel for you to be like, well, how do you know it's about race? Bruh, don't even do that. Don't even do that. Do I think that Molly stepped over a line during that altercation when she made that comment about Asian people in general? Absolutely. Especially when Andrew and Lydia were both defending her against Victor. Like, that was a Victor issue. And I think that statement felt more for Twitter than for Molly in general. And I do think that it is a subject worth having and worth tackling, but do I think it's gonna come up again? Highly doubt it. If it does, that'd be great, but I don't think so. And I just felt like she was trying to de-escalate the situation, but he kept bringing it up and she just didn't want to take that. And why should she? People always say, like, if a white person or somebody tries to do some anti-black shit to me, I'm gonna call them out. Well, that's what Molly did. Who cares if that's her boyfriend? If this is your boyfriend's brother, it's better to establish that shit now, honestly. Now that you know this is what it is, Now you know. And now he knows to shut the fuck up. Do I think they should have done something more with that? Absolutely. I think it was kind of lazy to just leave it there hanging in the air with no sort of conclusion about what happened, but that's narratively an issue. That's not Molly's fault. And I think people are like, well, why is Andrew being so passive? I'm like, Andrew is clearly a middle child. Andrew is not trying to just have fights for no reason or let shit or like have stupid conversations. Like, they're adults. I wish I could have done what Molly has done. I've been in situations where I've felt uncomfortable around things. No one has ever come for me like that, you know, because even then I still have to do something because I am from Brooklyn. But I think that Molly in that moment was speaking for like so many people who feel very silenced in that moment, and she wasn't silenced. And I think regardless of how you should feel about her, that moment, I felt like until she stepped over, she was completely in the right. I don't see why she should apologize to Victor. Victor should be the one apologizing to her. The same way that she should be on the best behavior for Victor and meeting Andrew's family, and she was. That's why she went on all those damn nature excursions. Victor should have never come for her that way. And when he did, he broke that contract of us just being like cool, and it wasn't cool anymore. And I would say that his pushing her was more aggressive than her fuck you, because that sort of smiley, calm, passive-aggressive stuff, that's Karen behavior. And you know what happens to Black people when they get attacked with that kind of attitude. As far as I'm concerned, Molly was in the right in that situation. I think her and Andrew is great. I'm glad she's with somebody who is more balanced than her, who is more patient. People like, he's perfect. Good, he a character. He don't have to have layers. He could just be there to be smart and funny and fine and eat the ass. You know, like I say, 10s all around. If you don't like Molly, that's fine. I don't care about that. But I just think that as we rewatch and watch the show, like, try to see her perspective, because it makes the show more interesting. Because if just Molly being unilaterally evil and Issa being unilaterally good, it's kind of boring. One of the best things about prestige television, whether it's animated, HBO, short form, long form, is that it allows us to have multiple different point of views that have value. And I think that when you so easily assign good and bad to two characters that are in conflict, when both of them have honestly very nuanced and interesting points, it makes for a weaker watching experience and a weaker conversation, because it's just like all piling on poor Yvonne Orji, who had just acted, girl. She an actress, okay? She's a virgin. She never even had sex before, but she out here pretending to get her ass eaten. She is doing what she got to do, okay? But I will say this about Insecure. They have to be a little bit tighter with the writing. We shouldn't have to watch the inside the episodes or the pour one outs or whatever that's called to get the context for things. It should just be in the show. I don't like to read supplementary material to understand what's going on in the main text. Didn't like it in Star vs. the Forces of Evil. I don't like it here. Don't like it in Avatar or nothing like that. So going forward in the next season, you could call me Issa. You know, we met that one time. I think I really enjoy Insecure. I like what it does. I think that sometimes it's got a little bit too much pressure to be genuinely revolutionary when it's just kind of being a simple story, but it just frames Black women at the forefront, which feels revolutionary, and that's unfortunate because it should be the basics of things by now, but it isn't. But I do think that Insecure really suffers from not having the same tight character focused narrative of a lot of other shows, and it just feels very slice of lifey, but without the character depth that I think the show is always leaning towards, but falling a little bit short of. Anyway, on that note, I'm gonna go finish this, and y'all can tell me how much you hate Molly in the comments.